Hello. Hello, Benedict. It's stream time. It's Friday. It's stream time. Ah! Hi. How's it going? How's your week? What's new? Do anything fun recently? Benedict, you do anything fun recently? Ben's just here for the snacks. Isn't that right, Ben? You hang out through my whole stream just for the snacks. Except for occasionally when you go away, but then you come back for the snacks. You gotta do a dance for the snakes. Thanks. Thanks for the snakes. He does what? Dance for the snakes? So we've got a house showing this weekend. Maybe this'll be the one. That would be nice. Maybe they'll be really excited and they'll put in an offer that day. And we'll be like, whoa, we gotta move. Gotta get all our stuff out. Gotta pack. Put everything in storage. Put the puppy in storage. Pack him up. Put him in the suitcase. Yes. What else are we supposed to do with puppy? He ain't gonna have a house to live in. He's gotta go in storage. Isn't that right, Benedict? Do you want to go live in storage? Do you want to live in storage? Store him on your lap. You can't put your lap in storage. Oh. I thought maybe he was gonna go to your lap. Droop. Not even a tail wag. Droopy tail. Oh, he's so sad. Hey, Sharkies. Happy Friday. It's Mario Day. Happy Mario Day. Wahoo! What's new? I hear that the audition went well. From you. You saw less today about Mario Day than in previous years. I think it was novel when somebody, came up with the idea. I guess I'm kind of assuming that it was a recent idea because I only saw that like one post about it relatively recently. I think it was just novel for a little while, and now there's less novelty. And also, I think a lot of people are kind of skeptical about the movie coming up. I'm going to see it. It looks like it'll be fun, and I think that people, myself included, have been a little harsh on the Chris Pratt. I think that he got some bad press and there was no good press to counter it, but As far as I can tell, unless I'm missing something, he didn't actually, like, do anything. He did one thing. He did one inappropriate thing some years ago. Yay, audition went well. Woo woo. Yay, Benedict. Woo woo. That's exciting. A certain other director recently hinted that he would want me to audition for a certain role, which is exciting, but would mean a lot of traveling for, like, all of the practices and everything, rehearsals. I don't know whether he was really serious about it or not, anyways. Spring break? Woo woo! Time to party? Oh, yeah, no. There's also that. Did I say in the near future? Was he? Did I miss that? Yeah. I see. I'm just trying to blank on that right now. I'm a little tired today. So yeah, we've got a house showing this weekend. So wish us luck with that. Maybe this will be the one. Maybe they'll get really excited and put in an offer right away, and they'll want the house by the end of the month, and we'll just, like, have to move out in a rush, and we'll be super stressed about it, but then it'll be done. And then we can start looking for somewhere where we want to live. Hopefully, yeah. And we're getting closer and closer. Oh, yeah. I don't know that I've ever done anything on spring break. The closest I ever came to doing something on spring break was when I went over to a friend's house at the beginning of spring break, and then it snowed and snowed and snowed, and there were feet of snow, and I got snowed in at his house for basically the entirety of spring break, and I just got stuck there. That's the closest I ever had to, like, a spring break, like, vacation. What? So it's honestly, like, weird to me to think of people, like, doing things for spring break as, like, it's spring break. That means it's time to, I don't know, do something that you wouldn't normally do. Like, for me, it's just like play video games, read books. I don't know. Lucky. Yeah, that. Oh, he's so sad. Not like he didn't just get a bunch of my cheese string. Disneyland. I had never gone to Disneyland as a child. I finally went for the first time. It's actually like 8 years ago now, or something like that. Went to Disneyland and Universal Studios, and then more recently, when we went to Singapore, we went to Universal Studios in Singapore just for a day trip. That was fun. Last went when he was 5. The rest of you never been. You know, it was not what I was expecting it to be. I think I maybe expected it to be more like what I've never been to Six Flags either, but Six Flags is all about like going on roller coasters and things, right? Disneyland was like there were just details everywhere. Everything was like if you're waiting in line to go on a ride, the wait in line is like as much of a thing as the ride itself because there's little you're like I don't know, there's little details everywhere you are. Like if you're waiting to go on the Indiana Jones ride, the line goes through like these caves and there's artifacts and there's moving things and so it's like waiting in line is a ride itself. So it's just like I think it's just all the little stuff happening everywhere is what was really interesting about it to me. And like weird things that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be exciting, but it was just the wooden coaster. Um, like I don't know, I really liked Mary Poppins when I was a kid, and so going along, and then suddenly there are the face actors for Mary and Bert. The chimney sweep's name is Bert, right? And they stop and they do a little dance, and there's a whole thing, and um, I don't know. It's just, and you're just walking along through the park when this happens. Or we stopped and talked to Peter Pan, and he stuck a stick in my hair, and it stayed there through the rest of the day, including on all of the coasters. Hey, BBAB's back. Good to see you. We're just talking about Disneyland. Mrs. Sharkey and the kids have not gone before, but Mr. Sharkey did when he was 5. And I did when I was 20 something. Like 28 or something like that. That was my first and only trip. Conversely, I loved Space Mountain. I thought Space Mountain was amazing. It was just like, if you have not been, it was all in the dark. When we went, it was more like Star Wars themed, right? Um, Insulin. No worries. Good to see you. Give Toothless some extra pets from us. Yeah, I had a great time on that one. That was one that I like needed to go on a second time, and the second time I was like, I have to sit in the front. Thank you. Convinced our friend to go on the front with me, and no hands. No hands on the bars. That was a lot of fun. So yeah, I think I was expecting going to Disneyland like before I had been. I just sort of assumed like you go there and there's a lot of rides and that's about it. But it was kind of almost more about everything else that you did in between the rides, which was really interesting. Also, it was weird that it was like there are restaurants scattered all over the park, and they're all like themed restaurants, themed with whatever area of the park you're in, because each area, like the park, is divided into a bunch of like little districts, um, and so there's restaurants all over the place. But you can get like alcohol, like you can get drinks in some of them, which caught me by surprise. And there's like secret menus that you can find ahead of time, and there's like pin trading, like you go and you wear a lanyard and you put the like pins all over it, like you get buy some pins from the store there or whatever, and you can get different pins in different shops, and then you'll come across people, and just random people like all over the parks will want to trade pins with you. They'll be like, oh, you've got Piglet, I love Piglet, I'll give you this for it. And you, okay, cool. Or they'll say, what do you want for Piglet, and so you pick one of their pins and you swap. So I actually had a lot of fun doing that. Finding someone in a store that was like, oh, I can't find this pen, and I was like, oh, I've got that one, here, I'll trade you. That was surprisingly fun for just a little like 5-day trip. Oh, interesting. Gotta dig out my pins. Those were fun. And apparently there's a lot of counterfeit pins, and the people in the shops could just like, take one of your pins and be like, yeah, that's a fake. But, big deal, whatever. But it was just like, under the influence. Weren't you over there before? Did you kind of creep this way? I adjusted my chair so that we could see the puppy, but then he's behind my chair again. I'm like, has he been kind of... So Mr. Sharky caught up with us on the YouTube videos, which is cool, and apparently took notes, I'm guessing, of things that he wanted to comment on. That's nice. I don't know. I feel like I feel like I should enjoy listening to podcasts, but I just have never put in the effort to like making that a part of my routine in any way. So I just have no experience in that arena of going and listening to people talking about stuff while I am doing other things. You thought you could get away? Reel him back in. We used to occasionally, but we've got satellite radio now, and so we just usually have that on, listening to indie music or whatever. Pre-car accident. Oh, did I miss a comment? Oh, I see. I did. What are you barking at? And you come back in here like, give me more snacks. Yeah, I'm curious about said notes. I'm guessing it's funny thoughts that he had while listening and reading. But I'm curious about what Mr. Sharky's notes are on. Yeah, so let's do a quick recap of the first 24 pages that we read. We got our little introduction to the Discworld, a bit of a rant about history and stories. The reason that history repeats itself. There was a weird, like, planting of a sort of scarecrow sounding thing with a mirror where its face should be, which is probably going to be to do with the swamp witch / voodoo woman that Lilith mentions. About 7 comments. Lots of stuff about mirrors so far. Mirrors are a definite theme in this book. My hair looks so flat. Oh, I hate it when it does that. It's like side to side because I'm like, I'm leaning back against something, and so it gets squashed on the back. Drives me crazy. Oh, it's a mess right now. Need to shower and comb it all out. Anyway, enough about that. Then we had a sabbat on, I think it was on the Bear Mountain, which we learned about. Where Desiderata That doesn't bode well. Desiderata Hollow did not attend because she was busy writing out her will and then having a little video call through a mirror and then dying. Busy night for Desiderata Hollow. We learned about the 4 important pieces of advice that her grandmother gave her. Never trust a dog with orange eyebrows. They're not orange, but they are very expressive. Always get the young man's name and address. Never get between 2 mirrors. And always wear completely clean underwear every day because you never knew when you were going to be knocked down and killed by a runaway horse, and if people found you had unsatisfactory underwear on, you'd die of shame. That bit of advice is something that I've heard referenced ever since I was a kid. And I feel like it's usually directed to women. I don't know if anybody ever told that to me, but I feel like I saw it referenced in being told to ladies, and I have never understood it. Of all the reasons to make sure you wear clean underwear, which, I'm sure there are other good reasons to wear clean underwear, but you might get hit by a bus has always been, the furthest reach of, why is that the one? Alright. I don't think I've ever noticed that, but maybe I just haven't noticed that. It's such a strange little thing, too. And of course, Sir Terry is British, so apparently this is a multinational bit of advice. Plus, not to mention, if you've been hit by a bus or whatever, it's always hit by a bus for some reason. If you've been hit by a bus, it's not unlikely that you're going to be pretty soiled anyways. Truck-coon. You're so obsessed with that one little section of corner. What happened on that piece of the wall that is the paint just really tasty smelling? Yeah. Anyway, those are the 4 pieces of advice. And I feel like, based on what I know of Sir Terry's writing, I feel like those pieces of advice are going to be relevant in this book, as well as Old Mother Dismas's temporal displacement. I feel like just try and remember some of the weird random things that she has said and wait for the places in the book later where those are relevant in conversations, because I feel like that's going to come up again. So Desiderata Hollow and Lilith, whose full name was Lady Lilith de something. Here we go. No, that's not it. Maybe it was later than that. Lady Lilith de Tempshire. They had a conversation, the 2 of them. It seems as though they are both fairy godmothers with drastically different views on how such power should be wielded. Oh, he's making the itchy face. for a pup? Desiderata Hollow had also a bit of an extended conversation with Death. I feel like Death got a few more lines than he usually does. Went on for a couple of pages. Although, she was doing most of the talking, but still. Yeah, and then... Let's see... The Sabbat was attended by Granny Weatherwax, Gammer Brevis, Nanny Og, and Old Mother Dismas, I believe is what she was called. Which was interesting that, there was a few different faces. They had some conversation about the lowering numbers of witches, among some other items that they also talked about. They talked about Magrat a bit, but Magrat was not present. And then Granny Weatherwax and Nanny Og both seemed to want to be the first to go through Desiderata's house after she had passed away. It seemed as though there was something in there they both wanted. Eventually, they agreed to both go through it at the same time tomorrow after lunch, I think it was. Right after lunch. They'll definitely both be there on time with each other, right? And that's where we're at. Young witches don't want to work these days conversation. I think it's more like young girls don't want to be witches these days. They're too busy entertaining themselves. Alright. So, I've babbled on for quite a while. It's almost 7:30. Everybody ready? Shall I get started? Is Mr. Sharkey settled yet, or is he still sorting himself out? I almost got me some magnetic Pokemon bookmarks that I keep forgetting in the other room. Which are his notes to bring up. Shall I wait? Shall we go through Sharky's notes? Sharky's 7 notes. No, proceed. Alrighty then. Herker, the poacher. Alright. Herker. It's a weird name. Herker. Herker the poacher shoveled the last of the earth into the hole. I think we maybe heard of him by a different name before. Oh, no. No, she said I got Herker the poacher to dig the hole out for me. I guess I just didn't notice it before. Herker. Herker the poacher shoveled the last of the earth into the hole. He felt he ought to say a few words. Well, that's about it then, he said. She'd definitely been one of the better witches, he thought, as he wandered back to the cottage in the pre-dawn gloom. Some of the other ones, while of course being wonderful human beings, he added to himself hurriedly, as fine a bunch of women as you could ever hope to avoid, were just a bit overpowering. Mistress Hollow had been a listening kind of person. On the kitchen table was a long package, a small pile of coins, and an envelope. He opened the envelope, although it was not addressed to him. Inside was a smaller envelope and a note. The note said, "I'm watching you, Albert Herker. Deliver the packige," Packige. I'll do my best to pronounce the spelling, but... "Deliver the package and the envelope." I also don't remember if this was the voice I was using for her. I think it was something like this. "And if you dare take a peek inside, something dreadful will happen to you. As a professional good fairy godmother, I ain't allowed to curse anyone, but I predict it would probably involve being bitten by an enraged wolf and your leg going green and runny and dropping off. Don't ask me how I know anyway, you can't, because I am dead. All the best, Desiderata." He picked up the package with his eyes shut. Well, here we go, another description of the Discworld's light. Light travels slowly in the Discworld's vast magical field, which means that time does too. As Nanny Ogg would put it, when it's tea time in Genua, it's Tuesday over here. In fact, it was dawn in Genua. Lilith sat in her tower, using a mirror, sending her own image out to scan the world. She was searching. Yeah. I'm not cursing you, but if you look inside, this is the bad stuff that'll happen, just because it'll happen. Not because I say so, just if you did, it would. Wherever there was a... Okay, so she was searching. Wherever there was a sparkle on a wave crest, wherever there was a sheet of ice, wherever there was a mirror or a reflection, then Lilith knew she could see out. You didn't need a magic mirror. Any mirror would do if you knew how to use it. And Lilith, crackling with the power of 1,000,000 images, knew that very well. There was just a nagging doubt. Presumably, Desiderata would have gotten rid of it. Her sort were like that. Conscientious. And presumably it would be to that stupid girl with the watery eyes who sometimes visited the cottage. The one with all the cheap jewelry and the bad taste in clothes. She looked just the type. But Lilith wanted to be sure. She hadn't got where she was today without being sure. In puddles and windows all over Lancre, the face of Lilith appeared momentarily and then moved on. And now it was dawn in Lancre. Autumn mists rolled through the forest. I think that's how we were pronouncing it before, right? Lancre? Lancre. Autumn mists rolled through the forest, so we've got a time of year. Granny Weatherwax pushed open the cottage door. Like a canker. It wasn't locked. The only visitor Desiderata had been expecting wasn't the sort to be put off by locks.
"She's had herself buried around the back,"
said a voice behind her. It was Nanny Ogg. Notice it was now dawn in Lancre. Lunchtime isn't usually around dawn, is it? Surprise, surprise. Granny considered her next move. To point out that Nanny had deliberately come early, so as to search the cottage by herself, then raised questions about Granny's own presence. She could undoubtedly answer them, given enough time. On the whole, it was probably best just to get on with things.
"Ah," she
said, nodding.
"Always very neat in her ways, was Desiderata." "Well, it was the job,"
said Nanny Ogg, pushing past her and eyeing the room's contents speculatively.
"You got to be able to keep track of things in a job like hers. By Gor, that's a bloody enormous cat."
"It's a lion," said Granny Weatherwax, looking at the stuffed head over the fireplace.
"Must have hit the wall at a hell of a speed, whatever it was,"
said Nanny Ogg.
"Someone killed it,"
said Granny Weatherwax, surveying the room.
"Should think so,"
said Nanny.
"If I'd seen something like that eating its way through the wall, I'd have hit it myself with the poker."
A surprise to no one. Sometimes I'll see that there is a footnote at the end of a page, and there it is. I need to scan the page and figure out where the asterisk is for that footnote so that I haven't passed it already without note, because sometimes I've gone right past a footnote without even seeing the mark for it. There was, of course, no such thing as a typical witch's cottage. But if there was such a thing as a non-typical witch's cottage, then this was certainly it. Apart from various glassy-eyed animal heads, the walls were covered in bookshelves and watercolor pictures. There was a spear in the umbrella stand. Instead of the more usual earthenware and china on the dresser, there were foreign-looking brass pots and fine blue porcelain. There wasn't a dried herb anywhere in the place, but there were a great many books, most of them filled with Desiderata's small, neat handwriting. A whole table was covered with what were probably maps, meticulously drawn. Granny Weatherwax didn't like maps. She felt instinctively that they sold the landscape short.
"She certainly got about a bit,"
said Nanny Ogg, picking up a carved ivory fan and flirting coquettishly. Footnote. Nanny Ogg didn't know what a coquette was, although she could probably hazard a guess. End of footnote.
"Well, it was easy for her,"
said Granny, opening a few drawers. She ran her fingers along the top of the mantelpiece and looked at them critically.
"She could have found time to go over the place with a duster,"
she said vaguely.
"I wouldn't go and die and leave my place in this state." "I wonder where she left, it,"
said Nanny, opening the door of the grandfather clock and peering inside.
"Shame on you, Githa Ogg,"
said Granny.
"We're not here to look for that." "Of course not. I was just wondering."
Nanny Ogg tried to stand on tiptoe surreptitiously in order to see on top of the dresser.
"Githa, for shame. Go and make us a cup of tea."
"Oh, all right."
He's like, I heard you leaning forward. That's where the snacks are. Nanny Og disappeared, muttering, into the scullery. After a few seconds, there came the creaking of a pump handle. Granny Weatherwax sidled toward a chair and felt quickly under the cushion. There was a clatter from the next room. She straightened up hurriedly. "I shouldn't think it'd be under the sink, neither," she shouted. Nanny Og's reply was inaudible. Granny waited a moment, then crept rapidly over to the big chimney. She reached up and felt cautiously around.
"Looking for something, Esme?"
said Nanny Og behind her.
"The soot up here is terrible,"
said Granny, standing up quickly.
"Terrible soot there is." "It's not up there, then,"
said Nanny Og sweetly.
"Don't know what you're talking about." "You don't have to pretend. Everyone knows she must have had one," said Nanny Og. "It goes with the job. It practically is the job."
"Well, maybe I just wanted a look at it," Granny admitted. "Just hold it a while. Not use it. You wouldn't catch me using one of those things. I only ever saw it once or twice. There ain't many of 'em around these days." Nanny Og nodded.
"You can't get the wood,"
she said. "You don't think she's been buried with it, do you?"
"Shouldn't think so. I wouldn't want to be buried with it. Thing like that, it's a bit of a responsibility. Anyway, it wouldn't stay buried. A thing like that wants to be used. It'd be rattling around your coffin the whole time. You know the trouble they are."
She relaxed a bit.
"I'll sort out the tea things," she said. "You light the fire."
She wandered back into the scullery. Granny Weatherwax reached along the mantelpiece for the matches, and then realized that there wouldn't be any. Desiderata had always said she was much too busy not to use magic around the house. Even her laundry did itself. Well, that's very fairy godmother-like, isn't it? Granny disapproved of magic for domestic purposes, but she was annoyed. She also wanted her tea. She threw a couple of logs into the fireplace and... No, you don't get to bark and then come in here and get a snack. No. Hey, no barking. She threw a couple of logs into the fireplace and glared at them until they burst into flame out of sheer embarrassment. It was then that her eye was caught by the shrouded mirror.
"Covering it over," she murmured. "I didn't know old Desiderata was frightened of thunderstorms."
She twitched aside the cloth. She stared. Very few people in the world had more self-control than Granny Weatherwax. It was as rigid as a bar of cast iron, and about as flexible. She smashed the mirror. Lilith sat bolt upright in her tower of mirrors. Her? The face was different, of course. Older. It had been a long time. But eyes don't change. And witches always look at the eyes.
Her!
Magrat Garlic, witch, was also standing in front of a mirror. In her case, it was totally unmagical. It was also still in one piece. But there had been one or two close calls. She frowned at her reflection, and then consulted the small, cheaply wood-cut leaflet that had arrived the previous day. She mouthed a few words under her breath, straightened up, extended her hands in front of her, punched the air vigorously, and said, "Hi-ya!" Magrat would be the first to admit that she had an open mind. It was as open as a field, as open as the sky. No mind could be more open without special surgical implements. And she was always waiting for something to fill it up. What it was currently filling up with was the search for inner peace and cosmic harmony and the true essence of being. When people say, "an idea came to me," it isn't just a metaphor. We've heard about this in the previous Witch's book. Raw inspirations, tiny particles of self-contained thought, are sleeting through the cosmos all the time. They get drawn to heads like Magrat's in the same way that water runs into a hole in the desert. It was all due to her mother's lack of attention to spelling, she speculated. A caring parent would have spelled Margaret correctly. And then she could have been a Peggy or a Maggie. Big, robust names, full of reliability. Is Peggy from Margaret? I have never heard that one before. I did not know. That's... Some abbreviations of names. Bill has always been weird to me. William to Bill. Because William can be Will, right? People get called Will. So where's Bill come from? Or Robert to Bob. Rob is right there. People get called Rob. How do you become Bob? The name's not Bobbert. You really want to meet someone named Bobbert now, though. Who goes by Rob for short. Yeah, Dick for Richard instead of Rick. Or Rich. Oh, and people in chat are saying the same things, yeah. Billiam and Bobbert. Ah, boy. Anyway, I did not know that Peggy was from Margaret. Maggie, I can see. You're just taking the R's out. But Peggy? Margaret? Peggy. They don't sound remotely similar. Yeah. There's a joke right there. It's right there. Weird sentence out of context. The whole thing to get, yeah. Wow. Granny doesn't even know what a sex object is. Nanny does. A caring parent would have spelled Margaret correctly, and then she could have, apparently, been a Peggy or a Maggie. Big, robust names, full of reliability. There wasn't much you could do with a Magrat. It sounded like something that lived in a hole in a riverbank and was always getting flooded out. It really does. It really sounds exactly like that. She considered changing it, but knew in her secret heart that this would not work. Even if she became a Chloe or an Isobel, on top she'd still be a Magrat underneath. But it would be nice to try. It'd be nice not to be a Magrat, even for a few hours. It's thoughts like this that start people on the road to finding themselves. Capital F, capital T. And one of the earliest things Magrat had learned was that anyone finding themselves would be unwise to tell Granny Weatherwax, who thought that female emancipation was a woman's complaint that shouldn't be discussed in front of men. Nanny Ogg was more sympathetic, but had a tendency to come out with what Magrat thought of as double intenders, although in Nanny Ogg's case they were generally single entendres, and proud of it. In short, Magrat had despaired of learning anything at all from her senior witches, and was casting her net further afield. Much further afield. About as far afield as a field could be. It's a strange thing about determined seekers after wisdom that, no matter where they happen to be, they'll always seek that wisdom which is a long way off. Wisdom is one of the few things that looks bigger the further away it is. Footnote. Footnote reads, hence, for example, the way of Mrs. Cosmopolite. Very popular among young people who live in the hidden valleys above the snow line in the high ramtops. Disdaining the utterances of their own saffron-clad, prayer-wheel-spinning elders, they occasionally travel all the way to number 3 Quorm Street in flat and foggy Ankh-Morpork to seek wisdom at the feet of Mrs. Marietta Cosmopolite, a seamstress. No one knows the reason for this, apart from the aforesaid attractiveness of distant wisdom, since they can't understand a word she says, or, more usually, screams at them. Many a bald young monk returns to his high fastness to meditate on the strange mantra vouchsafed to him, such as, "Push off, you!" and "If I see one more of you little orange devils peering in at me, he'll feel the edge of my hand, all right," and "Why are you buggers all coming around here staring at my feet?" They have even developed a special branch of martial arts based on their experiences, where they shout incomprehensibly at one another and then hit their opponent with a broom. End of footnote. Yeah. I was expecting that to be a joke about, like, Cosmopolitan magazine based on the name. But nope. It's just about a bunch of monks traveling to see a specific seamstress who has no idea why they're there. Currently, Magrat was finding herself through the Path of the Scorpion, which offered cosmic harmony, inner oneness, and the possibility of knocking an attacker's kidneys out through his ears. She'd sent off for it. There were problems. The author, Grand Master Lopsang Dibbler, had an address in Ankh-Morpork. This did not seem like a likely seat of cosmic wisdom. Also, although he'd put in lots of stuff about the way not being used for aggression and only to be used for cosmic wisdom, this was in quite small print between enthusiastic drawings of people hitting one another with rice flails and going, "Hi!" Later on, you learned how to cut bricks in half with your hand and walk over red-hot coals and other cosmic things. Magrat thought that Ninja was a nice name for a girl. She squared up to herself in the mirror again. There was a knock at the door. Magrat went and opened it. "Hi," she said. Herker, the poacher, took a step backward. He was already rather shaken. An angry wolf had trailed him part of the way through the forest. He said. He leaned forward, his shock changing to concern.
"Have you hurt your head, miss?"
She looked at him in incomprehension. Then realization dawned. She reached up and took off the headband with the chrysanthemum pattern on it, without which it is almost impossible to properly seek cosmic wisdom by twisting an opponent's elbows through 360 degrees. "No," she said. "What do you want?"
"Got a package for you,"
said Herker, presenting it. It was about 2 feet long and very thin. Yeah.
"There's a note,"
said Herker helpfully. He shuffled around as she unfolded it and tried to read it over her shoulder. Herker. Ninja is almost a good name for a young girl. Almost as good a name for a young girl as Thunderbolt Leia, Mia's name for her imaginary friend when she was 4 years old. Thunderbolt Leia was apparently her daughter. Yeah, it's a good name. Comes around the corner and just snack. All right, let's see. Tried to read it over her shoulder. Seems like wasn't he all nervous about wolves? Curses? Not curses? "It's private," said Magrat.
"Is it?"
said Herker agreeably.
"Yes." "I was told you'd give me a penny for delivering it,"
said the poacher. Magrat found one in her purse. "Money forges the chains which bind the laboring classes," she warned, handing it over. Herker, who had never thought of himself as a laboring class in his life, but who was prepared to listen to almost any amount of gibberish in exchange for a penny, nodded innocently.
"And I hope your head gets better, miss,"
he said. When Magrat was left alone in her kitchen-cum-dojo, she unwrapped the parcel. It contained one slim white rod. She looked at the note again. It said, "I never had time to train a replacement, so you'll have to do. You must go to the city of Genua. I would have done this myself, only cannot by reason of being dead."
Ella Saturday must not marry the prince. P.S. This is important.
She looked at her reflection in the mirror. She looked down at the note again.
P.S. P.S. Tell those two old biddies they are not to come with you. They will only ruin everything.
There was more.
P.S. 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 It has tendency to reset to pumpkins, but you will get the hang of it in no time.
I feel like every time I read something from Desiderata, I change the voice. I see. Technicalities. Magrat looked at the mirror again, and then down at the wand. 1 minute life is simple, and then suddenly it stretches away, full of complications. "Oh, my," she said. "I'm a fairy godmother." Granny Weatherwax was still standing, staring at the crazily webbed fragments, when Nanny Ogg ran in.
Esme Weatherwax, what have you done? That's bad luck, that is. Esme? Her? Her? Are you all right?
Granny Weatherwax screwed up her eyes for a moment, and then shook her head as if trying to dislodge an unthinkable thought.
What? You've gone all pale. Never seen you go all pale like that before.
Granny slowly removed a fragment of glass from her hat.
Well, bit of a turn, the glass breaking like that,
she mumbled. Nanny looked at Granny Weatherwax's hand. It was bleeding. Then she looked at Granny Weatherwax's face and decided that she'd never admit that she'd looked at Granny Weatherwax's hand.
Could be a sign, she said, randomly selecting a safe topic. Once someone dies, you get that sort of thing. Pictures falling off walls, clocks stopping, great big wardrobes falling down the stairs, that sort of thing. I've never believed in that stuff. What do you mean, wardrobes falling down the stairs?
Said Granny. She was breathing deeply. If it wasn't well known that Granny Weatherwax was tough, anyone might have thought she had just had the shock of her life and was practically desperate to take part in a bit of ordinary, everyday bickering. That's what happened after my great-aunt Sophie died, said Nanny Ogg. 3 days and 4 hours and 6 minutes, to the very minute, after she died, her wardrobe fell down the stairs. 3 days and 4 hours and 6 minutes, to the very minute. That's just so like, yes, what a significant number. He comes running up the stairs and then stops and stares at me like, did I hear snacks? So auspicious. Her wardrobe fell down the stairs. Our Darren and our Jason were trying to get it around the bend and it sort of slipped. Just like that. Uncanny. Well, I wasn't going to leave it there for her Agatha, was I? Only I visited her mum on Hogswatch Day, and it was me that nursed Sophie all the way through to the end. When people die, sometimes, it's so spooky, You're trying to steal their wardrobe, and your kids are getting around the bend, and whoops, it goes down the stairs. Days later. Uncanny. He's so polite. Granny let the familiar, soothing litany of Nanny Ogg's family feud wash over her as she groped for the teacups. The Oggs were what is known as an extended family. In fact, not only extended, but elongated, protracted, and persistent. No normal sheet of paper could possibly trace their family tree, which in any case was more like a mangrove thicket. And every single branch had a low-key, chronic vendetta against every other branch, based on such well-established causes célèbres, I don't know how to pronounce that, I haven't seen that phrase before, as what there Kevin said about our Stan at Cousin Dee's wedding, and who got the silver cutlery that Auntie M promised our Doreen was to have after she died, I'd like to know, thank you very much, if you don't mind. Nanny Ogg, an as undisputed matriarch, encouraged all sides indiscriminately. It was the nearest thing she had to a hobby. The Oggs contained, in just one family, enough feuds to keep an entire Ozark of normal hillbillies going for a century. An entire Ozark. And sometimes this encouraged a foolish outsider to join in, and perhaps make an uncomplimentary remark about one Ogg to another Ogg. Whereupon, every single Ogg would turn on him, every part of the family closing up together like the parts of a well-oiled, blue-steeled engine to deal instant, merciless destruction to the interloper. Ramtop people believed that the Ogg feud was a blessing. The thought of them turning their immense energy on the world in general was a terrible one. Fortunately, there was no one an Ogg would rather fight than another Ogg. It was family. Odd things, families, when you came to think of it.
Esme, you all right? What? You've got them cups rattling like nobody's business. And tea all over the tray.
Granny looked down blankly at the mess, and rallied as best she could.
Not my damn fault if the damn cups are too small, she muttered.
The door opened.
Morning, Magrat,
she added, without looking around.
What are you doing here?
It was something about the way the hinges creaked. Magrat could even open a door apologetically. The younger witch sidled speechlessly into the room, face beetroot red, arms held behind her back.
We just popped in to sort out Desiderata's things, as our duty to a sister witch,
said Granny loudly.
And not to look for her magic wand,
said Nanny.
Githa Og!
Nanny Ogg looked momentarily guilty, and then hung her head.
Sorry, Esme.
Magrat brought her arms around in front of her. She said, and blushed further.
You found it,
said Nanny. No, said Magrat, not daring to look Granny in the eyes. Desiderata gave it to me. The silence crackled and hummed.
She Gave it to you?
Said Granny Weatherwax. Yes. Nanny and Granny looked at one another.
Well,
Said Nanny.
she does know you, doesn't she?
Demanded Granny, turning back to Magrat. I used to come over here quite often to look at her books, Magrat confessed. And she liked to cook foreign food, and no one else around here would eat it, so I'd come up to keep her company.
Aha! Curry in favor,
Snapped Granny. I don't know if it's going to come up later, but I feel like that was a prime spot for a joke about curry. What with the foreign food and... But I never thought she'd leave me the wand, said Magrat. Really, I didn't.
There's probably some mistake,
said Nanny Ogg kindly.
She probably wanted you to give it to one of us. That'll be it, right enough,
said Granny.
She knew you were good at running errands and so on. Let's have a look at it.
Magrat's knuckles tightened on the wand. She gave it to me, she said in a tiny voice.
Her mind was definitely wandering toward the end,
said Granny. She gave it to me.
Fairy godmothering's a terrible responsibility,
said Nanny.
You got to be resourceful and flexible and tactful and able to deal with complicated affairs of the heart and stuff. Desiderata would have known that.
Yes, but she gave it to me.
Magrat Garlic, as senior witch, I command you to give me the wand,
said Granny.
They cause nothing but trouble. Hold on,
said Nanny.
That's going a bit far.
No, said Magrat.
Anyway, you ain't senior witch,
said Nanny.
Old Mother Dismas is older than you. Shut up. Anyway, she's non-compost mental,
said Granny. Non-compost mental. You can't order me. Witches are non-hierarchical, said Magrat.
That is wanton behavior, Magrat Garlic. No, it's not,
said Nanny Ogg, trying to keep the peace.
Wanton behavior is where you go around without wearing any.
She stopped. Both of the older witches watched a small piece of paper fall out of Magrat's sleeve and zigzag down to the floor. Granny darted forward and snatched it up.
Aha!
She said triumphantly.
Let's see what Desiderata really said.
Her lips moved as she read the note. Magrat tried to wind herself up tighter. A couple of muscles flickered on Granny's face. Then, calmly, she screwed up the note.
Just as I thought,
she said.
Desiderata says we are to give Magrat all the help we can, what with her being young and everything. Didn't she, Magrat?
Magrat looked up into Granny's face. You could call her out, she thought. The note was very clear. Well, the bit about the older witches was, anyway. And you could make her read it aloud. It's as plain as day. Do you want to be third witch forever? And then the flame of rebellion, burning in a very unfamiliar hearth, died. Yes, she muttered hopelessly. Something like that.
It says it's very important we go to some place somewhere to help someone marry a prince,
said Granny. It's Genua, said Magrat. I looked it up in Desiderata's books, and we've got to make sure she doesn't marry a prince.
A fairy godmother stopping a girl from marrying a prince?
said Nanny.
Sounds a bit contrary.
Should be an easy enough wish to grant, anyway,
said Granny.
Millions of girls don't marry a prince.
Magrat made an effort. Genua really is a long way away, she said.
I should hope so,
said Granny Weatherwax.
Last things we want is foreign parts up close.
I mean, there'll be a lot of traveling, said Magrat wretchedly. And you're not as young as you were. There was a long, crowded silence.
We start tomorrow,
said Granny Weatherwax firmly. Look, said Magrat desperately, why don't I go by myself?
'Cause you ain't experienced at fairy godmothering,
said Granny Weatherwax. This was too much, even for Magrat's generous soul. Well, nor are you, she said.
That's true,
Granny conceded.
But the point is, we've not been experienced for a lot longer than you.
We've got a lot of experience of not having any experience,
said Nanny Og happily.
That's what counts every time,
said Granny. There was only one small, speckled mirror in Granny's house. When she got home, she buried it at the bottom of the garden.
There,
she said.
Now try spying on me.
Yeah. We do have a scene break here. Shall I keep reading, or are people feeling tuckered out? He does not like spies. Reaching the end of a long week. That sounds like a vote for calling it here, if I am reading it correctly. All right. Oh, Granny. Granny is a great character. A lot of fun. But part of that is that she's not always the one you agree with. She has moments of being very badass. And, doing the right thing in the end and all that. But sometimes she's a little abusive. Standing. Alright, I am looking forward to reading Mr. Sharkey's notes from, You like that the characters are flawed? Yeah, definitely. Except for Nanny Og. Nanny Og is perfect. But other than that, they balance each other out, yeah. It is a well-written cast. Though if I'm not mistaken, doesn't Magrat disappear from quite a few books? Hopefully not sort of a spoiler, but... Anyway, this has been fun. I am enjoying being back to the Witches series, even if I'm kind of not certain what to do with the voices half the time. Yeah, Granny, the first book was Granny and Wizards. Yeah. So have a good weekend. Get some rest. Good luck with spring break. And wish us luck for our house viewing on Sunday. Maybe this will be it. Maybe this is the one. It'll be real nice. Thank you. Yeah, I hope so. Alright, well. Oh, BBAB's still here. Alright, well, have a good weekend to all of you then. And, yeah. I'll be back here next Wednesday, assuming that nothing gets in the way. So, have a good night. Have a good weekend. Hope you're enjoying the book. Good night. No worries. Lurking is just fine. Bye.